Hello, my name is Miguel Morales.
My name is Juan Castro,
Welcome to Power Your Story Season 5.
a podcast from Raygram Training Center High School in Chicago.
My name is Mark. This is our thing is making a podcast.
My name is Elvis Sanchez. In this episode, Mark, Carlos, and I interview Amy Tardif, Regional Manager of the Chicago StoryBooth for StoryCorps. StoryCorps' mission is to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a more just and compassionate world, which basically means caring for other people and wanting to understand or know their stories. We recorded our interview with Amy on the computer using a software called Zencaster. We talk about why it's so important to share your story and how to ask good questions when you interview someone. StoryCorps has booths where you can record interviews with your friends and family members in different cities. You can learn how to participate and find their podcast at storycorps.com. That's StoryCorps.com. Links will be in the show notes for this episode at poweryourstorypodcast.com.
My name is Amy Tardif, and I work here at StoryCorps at the Chicago Cultural Center in the Loop. StoryCorps is basically a core of people who record other people's stories. And our mission is basically to preserve and share humanity's stories to build connections between people and create a more just and compassionate world. We have recording booths set up around the country, and we give people 40 minutes in those recording booths, and they're set up very pristinely, like very, very professionally, and give people 40 minutes to talk to each other, usually two people at a time in a conversation, to just tell what happened in their lives, even if it's teenagers or adults or elderly people. And those stories are preserved at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and they're given to the people who did the recording for them to do whatever it is they want. And occasionally, on a very rare occasion, StoryCorps also will edit those stories from 40 minutes down to 2 or 3 minutes and put them on the radio for the world to hear. And that's where the building a more just and compassionate world comes in, because when other people hear what's gone on in somebody's life, we tend to think we're building empathy. When you hear somebody's story, an example is a mother who has met with and sat down and talked with the man who killed or murdered her son, and now they live next door to each other. And you wonder, well, how did she manage to do that? We're building empathy for somebody's feelings, or we're trying to, or maybe we're not. We're just hearing how somebody else's world has changed by sitting down and talking to another person.
How did it all begin?
Well, the man who runs the nonprofit company, Dave Isay, used to be a radio documentary producer. And when he was a little kid, he took a tape recorder and he interviewed his grandmother. And he could never find that recording. As much as he looked, every time he went back to his parents' or grandparents' house, he doesn't know what he did with it. To this day, he doesn't know what he did with it. And of course, that grandmother died. And he's still upset to this day. And he doesn't want that to happen to anyone else. He's also done a lot of projects, like one that you can find on YouTube called Ghetto Life 101, based here in Chicago at the Cabrini Green projects before they were torn down. And he gave a tape recorder to two boys younger than you guys. And he said, take this and record your lives. They had the tape recorder for months, and they every morning would wake up and they'd say, well, today I'm looking forward to the day, or today I don't want to go to school, or this happened yesterday and I'm depressed. And you know what happened, and what ended up becoming a documentary that won a lot of big awards was they witnessed a shooting. And it became something where the rest of the world, the rest of the country could find out what was going on in Chicago. And those guys grew up and they're still around and they're still friends with Dave Isay, the name of the man who started this company. And that's where he got his start doing radio documentaries like that. But the company is also based on the American oral history tradition of telling stories. And so someday, your stories are going to be important for people of the future to go back and listen to. You may not think so, but they will be. And this is one way for us to go into the future and have something for people of the future to hear what life was like.
Hello, my name is Carlos. How long have you worked with StoryCorps and what exactly do you do?
I started in October 2017, and my job as regional manager is to run what we call the exhibit space and story booth here at the Chicago Cultural Center. We book appointments for stories. We have a recording booth. I'm sitting in it right now. It's where I'm talking to you. It's a very magical space, we like to say, where people come and sit with their partner and do the recordings. And we have an exhibit space where the public can come and listen to the stories that have been edited to air on NPR, National Public Radio, or WBEZ here in Chicago. We have a TV where they can watch some of the animations that have also been made from some of those stories. There's a lady out there right now in our exhibit space who's listening on one of the kiosks, and she's picking up a phone and she's pressing a touch screen and she's picking a story to listen to. But the other half of our job is to partner with organizations in Chicago so that we're not only getting people who hear these stories on the radio. And so what we try to do here in Chicago is bring in a diverse partnership with other organizations so that we can diversify the archive at the Library of Congress. What does that mean? We want other organizations in Chicago to come in and record their stories so that the archive at the Library of Congress looks like the rest of the United States of America and sounds like the rest of the United States of America. We also have some grants that give us money, and the ones we have now want us to record stories about gun violence and mass incarceration and the impact of the justice system on diverse people of Chicago. So it's kind of complicated, but when we get those partners, we book appointments and we work through a partnership with them, which involves teaching them how to convince the people in their groups that it's okay to come in, that it's safe to come in and to tell their stories. But they can also be anonymous, which means they don't have to give us their name, or they can use a fake name. Unlike when they go to the news and tell the story on the news, they don't have to tell us who they really are, but they can still tell their story and they're safe. So there's a lot of stories to be told from people who have those impacts going on in their lives in Chicago. What did I say our mission was? Share humanity's stories to build connections between people and create a more just and compassionate world. Build empathy, teach other people what it's like to live through something like that. That's the hope.
Wow, nice story.
Oh, good.
Do you work with a team or by yourself?
I work with a team. I don't think anything is possible to do by yourself. I have two people who are community engagement associates who help to find those partners, but they're also called facilitators. And a facilitator is a person who works through recording the story when a pair comes in to record a story. They help people do the paperwork. They bring them into the booth that I'm sitting in now. They run the equipment for them. They guide them through any kind of nervousness they might have. They help them ask questions if they don't know what to ask each other. And they take notes throughout the whole interview. And when the interview is done, they log and archive on the computer all of this information for the Library of Congress, because what the Library of Congress is that whole oral history part. And if you or your teachers or a professor or a researcher wants to go to the Library of Congress and look up any kind of interview, they would look up keywords like you do on the internet. And they'd look up when you push into Google, you say, I want to look up something about gun violence. And all kinds of things come up. Or you look up something about Halloween and stories come up about Halloween.
Hi, my name is Elvis. What did you choose this job?
I might have to go into a little bit of my history first. I was working at a public radio station in Florida, and then there's the trailer that has a recording studio in it that goes around the United States from public radio station to public radio station recording stories. And that trailer came to the station that I was working at in Florida, and I worked closely with it for 6 or 8 weeks and fell in love with the stories that came out of the people in Florida where I was working. And I was looking for a job, and I said, I want to work with them.
Okay, that's cool. My second question is, what do you love most about it?
Hearing about people's stories. And I know that sounds cliche because we are about stories, but many of the stories that people tell are just your average, here's what happened in my life. But on a rare occasion, maybe once or twice a month, people come in and tell a story that is unbelievable, not in an unbelievable sense that you don't believe it is true, but unbelievable in a remarkable, amazing, makes you want to cry way that you can't believe that they went through it, or that it's just, it's one of those ones that you're going to put through and ask to have it edited for the radio, that a movie should be made about it, that sometimes it's amazing in a way that's just beautiful, and sometimes it's amazing in a way that you can't believe somebody made it through that. And it gives you hope and inspiration and makes you feel like if they got through it, then you can get through whatever you're going through in your life. The people who come in to tell their stories at StoryCorps are real people. They're just talking about themselves. And I think it's something that's raw and real and makes you really realize what matters in life. And that is what I love the most, because every day that happens, you're brought back to reality.
What's the hardest part of your job?
Well, similarly to the part I love the most, hearing those stories is also the hardest part, because you have to leave it at work. And what that means is you can't make it part of your emotions. We have training here at StoryCorps called self-care. And a lot of professional people have self-care training. Police officers, doctors, ER physicians, and probably many, many others have self-care training. But you wouldn't realize that StoryCorps people do too, because we hear stories that impact us, because you're sitting in this booth listening to people's stories and you absorb them and you absorb the emotions. And then you need to leave it at work and not take it home and remember what you heard that day. So that's hard. Sometimes you can get home and you remember what you heard, and you just have to do something for yourself, do something fun, have a good meal, talk to friends, and go do some sport or go take a walk or pet your cat. So not taking those hard stories home in your heart is a hard thing.
Why do you think it's important for people to tell their stories?
Because everybody has one. You think you don't have a story, I bet every single one of you has a story to tell. And we have little old ladies who come in here and they'll sit and watch our animations, and we'll say, you could record your story. And they say, I don't have a story to tell. You've got to be kidding me. Every single person has a story to tell. And it's important that people get heard and listened to, because it makes you feel validated and makes you feel important. So everyone has a story to tell, and we need to listen to each other, right?
Yeah. Next question. How do you tell a good story?
A good story is one that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, has conflict, like something happens in the story and it gets resolved. That conflict has an ending, something turns. And so, just like one that you read in a book, that you want to tell a story that has all those things to it.
Who can share their stories as StoryCorps?
Anybody and everybody, except we like for people to be at least 10 years old, but we've had people younger than 10. We can even do them in any language. We do have a bilingual facilitator who speaks Spanish, so they can be done in Spanish and logged in Spanish for the Library of Congress. And like I said, they can be anonymous or using a pseudonym, which is a fake name.
All right. So my other question is, what are your best tips for interviewing someone else?
Well, you want to ask open-ended questions, not something that ends in a yes or a no. Ask for examples. So if someone says that was the time in my life when I was happy, then you want to ask them to say, well, describe a day in your life from that time, or ask for an example. Always ask follow-up questions. Ask why. People never ask why enough. Ask for a complete story. That sometimes the facilitator will end up doing that. If you don't finish the story, we'll say, well, what happened next? How did that make you feel? How did that end? And don't ask two questions at once. You know what a compound question is? You'll always get the answer to one of them, but not both. And be curious. If you're interested in it, then everyone's going to be interested in it. And have an open ear, we like to say. You don't have to go by the list of questions you have in front of you. Listen to what your partner is talking about. And if it's interesting to you, ask more about it. So always be listening.
Who should we interview and how can we ask great questions?
You should interview anybody you want. But sometimes it's better to interview somebody you don't know as well than your best friend, because then you'll learn more about them. And I like to tell people your age to interview your grandparent or your parent, somebody older, because they're the ones who need to get their story down on tape. Some good questions are things like, how did that make you feel? Can you remember a specific time when that happened? Give me an example. Can you paint a picture in words? What were you thinking when that happened? What were you thinking the first time that happened? Can you remember the first time? Just prodding people to give you feelings rather than just facts.
Have you ever told a story or done an interview for story?
I haven't told my own, but there are times when somebody comes in by themselves, even though we encourage people to bring somebody along. And when that happens, one of us comes in with them and acts as the interviewer. And so I've done that a number of times, but I haven't done my own story yet, no.
Do you want to make your story?
I do someday. My kids came to visit and I asked them if they wanted to come in and record, and they did not. I was kind of surprised, but maybe someday they will, or my mom will come visit and I'll bring her in, and that would be her story. But yeah, I think I do, but at some point.
Yeah, me too.
I hope so.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where can people find out more StoryCorps?
Our website, StoryCorps.org. We also have the Chicago website, StoryCorps.org/Chicago. And you can find all kinds of things like exactly what happens in an interview. You can listen to the edited pieces that have aired on the radio, watch the animations that we've created that air on PBS. You can book an appointment. There's a list of great questions to use as an example of starting point for you guys to talk to each other. Or simply, you could download our app for free and have your own StoryCorps recording day, as long as you find quiet spaces away from each other to do it yourselves, or you can do it at home.
Hello, the name of the app.
You just look up StoryCorps and it's going to be a bright red icon. I think it's the only one like it.
Is there anything else you like to say was today.
Just that I think you guys are doing a great job, and I'm really proud of you for doing a podcast. And I really appreciate you asking me to help you with it.
Thank you.
Power Your Story podcast is produced by students at Ray Graham Training Center High School in Chicago.
With broadcast support from After School Matters in the Creative Impossible Studios.
Our theme music is by Gennaro Jackson, aka DJ Sparks.
You can find our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and on the web at poweryourstorypodcast.com.
We are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Power Your Story Podcast.
Follow us, subscribe, leave a review, and share our show with a friend.
Thank you for listening. Keep it classy.
Turn up all the way.